A lion's roar shattered the morning silence. Deep, relentless, and aimed at a lifeless concrete wall. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't move, just roared like something was buried beneath the earth itself. What they found behind that wall would unearth a truth darker than anyone was ready for. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The concrete wall stretched 12 feet high, smooth and blank, a relic from the original perimeter before the preserve expanded. It separated the lion's habitat from the older section of forest beyond, a wooded expanse long since deemed off-limits due to unstable terrain and an abandoned utility trench that had partially collapsed years ago. No animals were supposed to be back there. No people either. Just dead pine needles, wind, and time. But Aslan wouldn't stop roaring at it. He didn't pace, didn't rest, didn't blink. His great body, lean and scarred from 2 decades of leadership, was a statue of tension, shoulders locked, tail still, amber eyes transfixed on the wall as if he could see straight through it. Each roar was expelled with such force that his ribcage visibly contracted, the skin around his flanks drawing tight over ancient muscle and old wounds. And each one sounded the same, measured, resonant, charged with a warning no one could translate. "What the hell is he seeing?" Sam asked, voice low, almost reverent. "Nothing," Derek replied, but the word came out hollow. They all felt it, that invisible weight hanging in the air like pressure before a storm. Miles took a slow breath and scanned the wall, then the trees beyond. The forest was motionless, but wrong somehow. Too quiet for this time of year. No bird calls, no rustling branches, just wind hissing gently through the upper canopy, and Aslan's roar like a metronome counting down to something. "I've worked this reserve 12 years, Lisa said quietly. "I've never seen an apex predator behave like this without a visible cause. Not sickness, not fear. This is primal." That word lingered in the silence. Primal. Aslan, the lion who once disarmed fights with a glance, now looked like a sentry possessed. Suddenly the lion's ears twitched backward, not toward them, but toward the other side of the wall. A low, trembling growl rumbled up from his chest, different from the roars before, closer to a warning meant for something real, something present. "There's something over there," Miles said, instinct pushing the words from his throat before reason could catch them. "Something we can't see." Lisa stepped forward again. "We need to check that forest perimeter." But Aslan snapped his jaws and surged forward, slamming his paws into the dirt between them and the wall, unleashing a roar so loud it shook leaves from the branches above. He was no longer warning them. He was trying to hold something in. The stench hit first, stale urine, old blood, rot. Not overpowering, but sour and clinging. The kind of scent that didn't come from a day or two of neglect, but from long, calculated cruelty. The pit was maybe 4 feet deep, just wide enough for the cub to turn halfway in a circle. It had no bedding, no water, no light. Just concrete, excrement, and shadows. The cub, its ribs sharp beneath matted fur, lay pressed against the farthest corner, too weak to rise, but its eyes were wide and glassy with panic. It whimpered again, the sound threadbare from overuse, like it had screamed itself silent days ago. Lisa knelt beside the hole, her breath catching. "Shock collar, industrial grade, not one we use." Her voice was clipped, steady, but her hands trembled as she reached for her radio. Derek crouched next to her, eyes narrowing at the crude locking bolts embedded into the concrete frame. This pit was sealed from the outside, poured over. Someone built this to hide it. Sam stepped back and stared at the ground like it had betrayed him. "On reserve land?" he asked, voice low, incredulous. "No," Miles said grimly. "Just beyond it. Technically private land, but close enough for Aslan to hear." That was the part that twisted in everyone's gut. Aslan hadn't just heard the cub, he'd felt it. Somehow, in ways science hadn't bothered to map, the old lion had detected the suffering buried behind feet of concrete and years of bureaucratic neglect, and for days he had roared into the void, warning the world that something had been entombed alive. Lisa finally reached down, fingers brushing the cub's flank. It flinched violently, then collapsed again. "We need the vet. Now." But Miles didn't move. He was staring at the wall, at the careful, clean seam that had covered the cavity. "This wasn't just an accident," he said slowly. "This took time. Planning. The concrete's newer than the rest of the wall." "And the collar?" Lisa asked. "That's black market gear. Same kind traffickers use in illegal trophy circuits." A long silence settled over the team. Then Sam whispered, "How the hell did they get it in here without us knowing?" No one answered, because the real question wasn't how it got in. It was how many more had been buried where no one had dared to look. They called it a scandal, but scandal didn't come close. It was betrayal. Of trust, of duty, of every living thing inside the Echo Ridge sanctuary that had once been declared untouchable. When the internal report surfaced, unredacted, damning, and signed off by Miles himself, it didn't just name names, it mapped timelines, paper trails, veterinary logs with missing entries, security footage with mysterious gaps, and Ray Walker at the center of it all. Charming, well-credentialed, a former consultant with full clearance, and a talent for slipping through the cracks he helped create. Ray hadn't just facilitated smuggling, he'd orchestrated it. He'd manipulated hormone treatments, sedated lionesses without authorization, and falsified medical files to disguise births. The sanctuary, once a haven for rescue and rehabilitation, had become, at least for a time, a breeding ground for black market demand. Cub after cub, stolen before their eyes opened, packed into crates under cover of night, and driven off to be auctioned like artifacts. But it was the last one, the forgotten one, that shattered the illusion. When Ray's final deal collapsed, he didn't just cut ties. He buried evidence. Literally. The old drainage duct had been decommissioned years ago, but he knew its location. He wedged the cub in, blocked it off with fresh concrete, and disappeared. It was never meant to be found. It would have starved in silence if not for a single, aging lion who refused to let it die unheard. The board tried to contain it. Dr. Evelyn Carr spun press statements laced with ambiguity. Unexpected breach, isolated incident, individual misconduct. But then came the leak. Miles had seen enough denial, enough bureaucracy treating lives like liabilities. He sent the report to the press, and within 48 hours, the reserve became a war zone of headlines. Carr's resignation was neither graceful nor quiet. Protesters stood at the gates. Funding was frozen. Staff who once held proud titles were subpoenaed. But through it all, one image repeated across screens and posters. Aslan, lean and golden, framed against the scarred concrete wall he'd refused to leave. He didn't roar anymore. He didn't have to. The world had heard him. And in that moment, stripped of politics and PR, it became clear. In a world full of human noise, only the wild still remembered how to tell the truth without speaking a single word. The days after Echo's rescue passed in a haze of urgency and fragile hope. The cub's survival wasn't guaranteed. Malnourished, dehydrated, and deeply traumatized, he lay curled in the corner of the clinic pen, barely more than a shadow. But slowly, under the constant presence of heat lamps, soft hands, and measured feedings, his trembling eased. His eyes began to track movement. His muscles twitched with the instinct to stretch and stand. And when he finally let out a tiny, croaking roar, a sound barely stronger than a cough, it echoed through the clinic like a benediction. Miles was there for it. He didn't cry easily, but that sound broke something open. He'd seen what had almost happened. He'd watched that wall come down, watched that small body pulled into the light. He'd watched Aslan fall silent only after Echo had been heard. When they named the cub Echo, it wasn't sentimental. It was deliberate. Echo for the sound trapped beneath concrete. Echo for the call that had bounced off stone and bone and found an answer. Echo for the idea that something so small, so nearly erased, had changed the course of everything. As Echo grew stronger, the reserve changed with him. He was integrated slowly, first into the observation nursery, then allowed supervised play with the other rescued cubs. The older lions, especially the males, kept their distance, all except one, Aslan. He never approached Echo directly, never intervened in his play or fought for dominance. But he was always nearby, always within sight. He'd sit atop the old knoll just beyond the rehab pens, his silhouette cutting against the sky like a monument, watching, listening, guarding. And though Aslan no longer roared, not like he did at that wall, his silence said more than sound ever could. The ferocity that once cracked the dawn had faded into something more elemental, presence. He was no longer the voice that demanded attention. He had become the reason to remember why listening mattered. Tourists still came, though they no longer asked just to see lions. They asked for Echo, for Aslan, for that hill. The sanctuary ran a new tour route past the site of the rescue, now marked with a modest plaque, where the wild spoke first. Justice, in the end, hadn't come in courtrooms or board meetings. It had come in the roar of a lion that wouldn't stop, in the trembling cry of a cub that refused to die unheard, and in the quiet that followed, a quiet the world finally understood how to honor.